what I want to briefly take you through is about sex, gender, and sexual orientation. And I understand the next speaker, Dr. Ronald, will be talking to you a little more about gender identity. So as a brief overview, I would be talking to you about the meaning of the term sex, gender, and sexual orientation, and the current state of knowledge about this, and a brief take-home message. Now, some of the terms which we will cover today over the next 15 minutes or so is to do with sexual identity, gender identity, and sexual orientation. And the term which you all may be familiar with about the LGBTQAI+. I know Dr. Ronald will be talking about gender identity, but I will just touch on a few points about gender identity so that we need to understand that a little before I talk to you about sexual orientation. So when we talk about sexual identity, the very basic bottom line tenet is that it's the biological sex that we are born with. And this word sex, in fact, as Dr. Ruth, very pointedly, very nicely pointed out, that when she joined medical college, I'm sure the column those days was your name, age, and sex. And it is really now in the last few years that has been changed to gender. And in India, in the last few years, allows you to assign your gender even for the NEET forms, which people now do to enter into medicine. In the last couple of years, you have the option to say male, female, or the third gender. But sex is what is biologically determined. And if you look at sexual identity, and the bottom line is that it is dictated to by your chromosomes. There is a genetic basis to that. And what is interesting is that all embryos, whether genetically male, as you know, the chromosome signature for that is XY, and for female it is XX, all of them are anatomically female in the early stages of fetal life. It is really from the 6th week to 3 months that because of the action of fetal androgens, that the fetus differentiates from that to male. So if you're male XY, you differentiate into male. If you're female XX, that doesn't happen and you continue, you are female. And there are key genes which affect this development. And a lot of this understanding has happened over the last 10 or 15 years or even 20 years, which has helped us to understand when things go awry. So if you look at it from the biological viewpoint, and this is, I must say, the current state of knowledge, when we talked about sex 20 years ago, it was different. And I'm sure those of you, because you're learning in this course and few years from now, you will be taking a course. It is quite possible that what I'm telling you today will be, the current state of scientific knowledge 5 or 10 years from now will be different. But as of now, what we do understand is that there are 4 key moments at the development of biological sex. And fertilization, that is when the chromosomal sex is determined, is the bottom line, what we talk about when we talk about sex. What is your chromosomal sex? Now, in intrauterine development, as I showed you on the previous slide, that development can occur and, for the testis of the fetus to grow, or the fallopian tubes in, uterus, and that what differentiates into the internal sex organs and the external sex organs. Now, birth is at the time when which the outer genitalia are examined and gender is assigned. And I think it was Reverend Peacock who mentioned that, ultimately when you're born, your birth certificate assigns your, this is your gender. And that is really based on biological sex. And abroad, definitely there are a school of thought with child psychologists who say that it is all you're assigning at that time when a child is born is the biological sex. It is not really the gender, which can take time to develop. And for some children, where there is a synchrony between the biological sex and the gender, it goes fine. But for those children who have the biological sex is different from the gender, then you are unnecessarily causing a problem for them because you've already gone and assigned a gender at birth. So there is a school of thought which says, you should assign it later. But at this moment of time, for example, in India, the gender is assigned as birth. And even there has been progress in India. And if you look at the Aadhaar card the last few years, that there is the option of the third gender. And of course, there are some difficulties, I understand, over the last couple of years, when after your some do a sex reassignment surgery, then getting your Aadhaar changed can be quite difficult. But at least the principle is there, which was not there a few years ago. And puberty is the other time where hormonal gender is affirmed. And this can be of importance, for example, when you have young children, for example, on cancer treatment, where their biological sex or their gender is in synchrony, but their secondary sexual growth characteristics may get affected because they're on, say, chemotherapy or therapy which interferes with the normal development of puberty. So at each of these stages, for genetic or other reasons, abnormal processes can result in what we call a potential intersex, that is up to 1, 2, and 3, that is fertilization, intrauterine development. Up to the time of birth, it can cause intersex. Now, at birth, sometimes there are children who may have what we call an undescended testis and things like that, where the biological gender is clearly male, and a doctor is able to differentiate that. Now, this is really a reiteration of the earlier slide, where intersex is really for various genetic conditions which have resulted in the non-differentiation, that a child may be born with both ovaries and testes, and they may have ambiguous genitalia at birth. And it can be quite a difficult task for the parents, for doctors to be able to assign the correct gender. And as I said, there is a school of thought which thinks that perhaps this should be assigned later. But I think, especially in India, society has to really be ahead of thought. But as Reverend Asser said, I think you all are looking very much to be ahead 10 years, 25 years ahead. So maybe this is something we need to think about, which can happen for the future. Now, gender, I'm not spending too much time on it, as I know that you have a session after this. But I thought I would need to have a few slides on it so that I can move on to sexual orientation. So gender is the socio-cultural and self-understanding of masculine versus feminine, and it is to do with our behavior, mannerisms, and clothes. And this gender identity develops between 18 months and 3 years, and both normal identity and what we call gender identity dysphoria seems to have biological roots influenced by learning. If you note, the term is no longer gender identity disorder. Many years ago, when we did sessions on this, we called this gender identity disorder, but that terminology has clearly changed because we've now understood that there is no disorder in this. It is really the dysphoria which the young person feels is because of the difficulty they have, or getting society to recognize that there is a difference between their biological gender and their biological sex and the assigned gender. And a lot of young people are able to come to terms with it, and they don't need psychiatric intervention unless it is to help them get comfortable with how to handle society, because the problem is not within them, but with how society sees them. So if in the third gender, it was really a few years ago that was formally recognized by the Supreme Court, and Tamil Nadu really pioneered a lot of the work in that area. And if you look at Facebook, the number of gender options are as much as 71. So about gender and gender identity, I will not say anymore because your next session will talk to you about that. But as I said, this is just to help you understand that gender is what the social cultural has social cultural aspects to it, and its bottom line is what the young person, whether they see themselves clearly as masculine, feminine, or trans, or there are various other terms like cis and various combinations. Now moving on to sexual orientation, and the word sexuality is also loosely used to cover that. And a lot of the confusion is when the terminology is used very commonly to when you talk about sexuality, there is a component of your biological sex, your gender identity, as well as sexual orientation. But if you look at sexual orientation per se, there are aspects of your sexual attraction, your sexual behavior, as well as your sexual identity. All three have a role to play when you talk about sexual orientation. At a very basic level, and because of time constraints, and just so that you get the understanding of these terms, I'm sure all of you are already familiar with it. But heterosexual is when the person is attracted to a person of the opposite gender. Homosexual is when they are attracted sexually to their same gender. Bisexual is when they are attracted at the core to both genders at a minimum. And pansexual is when there is attraction across genders and not restricted to any gender. And asexual is also an understanding now that there are a subgroup of people who don't have a sexual attraction to any gender. And it was really in the last century, you may have heard of the famous Kinsey study, when they talked first about there was a study on sexual interests and in men and women. And as early as that time, he very clearly said you cannot divide their sexuality as to homosexuality or heterosexuality just as sheep and goats, that there are varying bisexual responses, and that really falls well within the normal category. So there may be some people who are exclusively heterosexual, some people who are exclusively homosexual, but there can be a wide gradation in between. And Sedgwick spoke about that, well, is it more useful to talk about a term called homosocial rather than homosexual? Because homosexual focuses very narrowly on sexual attraction, but homosocial is your interactions. There are some people who may clearly prefer interactions within their own gender. So, for example, in society, we know on an average in most societies, women are allowed to be more homosocial than men. Women are allowed in public sometimes to, there is no, people don't question it. They are holding hands or hugging or, or kissing in public. And in terms of a friendship or a platonic behavior, it is not really questioned, whereas men can be questioned. In fact, India is one of the few countries where it has been reported that people are still comfortable with men holding hands, and it does not necessarily have a sexual connotation at all. So when you look at the question of what is normality and what is disorder, we need to remember that the whole point of the definition of normality means norms as if the majority behavior, which is really not okay to define normality and disorder when you talk of sexual behavior, because what the majority of the people, how the majority of the people behave may not be, implies that how the minority behave is abnormal, and that is not at all the case. And also we need to remember sexuality is something that people may not talk about that easily. So what you assume is majority behavior may not really be majority behavior. And societal norms and stigma should not lead us to call a different orientation as a disorder, because as the Kinsey's work showed in the last century, there is a wide range of normality. And in psychiatry, we are very clear, we do not call something a disorder unless it causes a significant distress to the patient. And in this case, to the person, the distress should not be because of a mismatch between what they want and what society wants. And though if you look at, when I say current psychiatric thought, you will see that it is nearly 50 years old, that homosexuality was no longer considered to be a disorder and removed from, there's what we call a DSM, of the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual, which is used to diagnose mental illness. And it was very clear that nearly 50 years ago, that homosexuality was removed from that. But it has taken general society a long time. In fact, it took India just a couple of years ago that Section 377 was repealed, and homosexuality was decriminalized. So it's really taken a long time for general society to catch up to what psychiatry was talking about nearly 50 years ago, that homosexuality is really should never be considered a disorder. And the other point which I would want to say is that homosexual behavior is different from homosexuality as an orientation. For example, it is considered quite normal for some young people to sexually experiment in their teens, and that does not necessarily make them a gay or straight, and in fact, a lot of people who are very clearly homosexual when they're teenager, they may experiment with heterosexual behavior and vice versa. So that really doesn't tell you either way. And I think that I know the NCC I've had, I think this is my third session on gender and sex, I think probably 2015 or 16, when there was a meeting in Bangalore and St. John's. I remember talking to a group of the NCCI, as well as a few years back in Coimbatore. And I thought it was really wonderful how the church, you have come to discuss this very openly and be comfortable about discussing that. And I was really happy that our own Pope Francis a few years ago, very clearly when questioned by a group of journalists who tried to put him on the spot as to, how do you see homosexuality? He was very clear to say, who am I to judge? And hopefully the Catholic Church, I know for a fact that in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of discussion about this. And I hope that they would also move ahead to be a little more, open to discussing this topic, especially with the young people. I'm sure you're familiar with this term of LGBTQAI, and that is the term of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer or questioning, asexual, intersex, and whatever we are. I hope all of us are also the A of the ally, because this is a group who would need support. And I think as a group, whether you're talking about any kind of minority, and especially whether gender identity or orientation, there is a lot of victimization because of lack of understanding, stereotypes, misinformation, and homophobia. And we know discrimination, bullying, they're victims of violence, abuse, physical abuse, as well as sexual abuse. So it is really, I think, as spiritual leaders, one needs to advocate for gender justice and equality and protection from gender violence, prevention of exploitation, and to ensure human rights are protected. So I think it is really a huge step ahead that you all are having so much of discussion about it, because all of you are in a powerful position to really advocate for that. Because when young people are in distress, they will approach you for help and advice. And as Dr. Ruth spoke about, Dr. Anjali, Reverend Anjali, that is really a space where all of us, there are not enough people, enough Anjalis around. So all of you are in a powerful position to help these young people. So the final take-home message is that sex is biologically determined. Gender is a socialized behavior, but has biological roots. And psychiatry no longer sees homosexuality as a disorder. And I can tell you that my own role in the last 30 years, I've been 25 years working in St. John's, it has changed from, when I was a student, I remember psychologists would look at whether somebody's sexual orientation could be changed. In the last 20, 30 years, it has very clearly moved to helping family members deal with the reality of their sons or daughters' sexual orientation. So I will end there. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take it.